Hello, I have gotten a beautiful question about romantic relationships from a dear friend and brother of mine, and wanted to share the question and what comes alive for me being in it with you all in case I don't know, does anybody else live in questions about their romantic relationships besides me? Maybe this might be helpful. So he writes, how vulnerable do you think it makes sense to be with a woman you're seeing? And tell her about all the fears and insecurities in the name of shining light on them and growing from it? Or do I play it cool and don't reveal everything? I know it's very context driven and specific to each person and their unique relationship, but what's your overall advice? I feel really warm and touched receiving this question. It's really beautiful, and I sit in this question as well. I will just share my experience of what I'm playing with. I don't know if I have any advice. Maybe a couple invitations, but yeah, what comes alive for me in reading this question is this is a great question to bring to the woman you're seeing, right? What I find is really helpful in romantic relationships or in any relationship really is making our culture, our interpersonal dynamics actually intentional. And so bringing these kinds of questions into the relationship dynamic can be really liberating. And so just on a practical level, it can be as simple as, hey, I'm noticing I have some fears and insecurities coming up that I'd love to share with you for the purpose of shining light on them and potentially growing from them. Like, is that something you're available for? And just getting a yes and that's welcome, for me, creates a lot of spaciousness of like, okay, cool, now I can really share without feeling like I'm not allowed to or something. So we're taking this unnamed question, right? Like, we're taking this question and bringing it into the context of the relationship dynamic and seeing like, hey, what's in bounds here? How free are we, right? Is like are we free to be all of who we are? And so that's really, from my experience, what's most important to me is I just have this huge value for wholeness with a W. Wholeness with a W. But like, yeah, being all of who I am in every moment. So I used to live my life where I had kind of like, I was fragmented or like compartmentalized. Like I had like my work forest and my forest that I was around my certain friends and my forest I was in class or whatever, and forest like around my family and my romantic relationship. And I had all these kind of like, and then there was like this whole half of the pie that wasn't even welcome, and now it's like I just want to be all of who I am in every moment. And I want that for me, and I also want that for the person who I'm dating. And so just asking the question in a relationship for me of like, hey, are we free to be all of who we are in our relationship? And both people saying yes to that. Like, it's profound in my experience, the shift that can happen in my body, in our we space, and in the relationship dynamics with just a question like that. Like, yeah, like, is all of us welcome in the space? Like, am I free to be? And anytime I feel any resistance, like, let's say something's coming up and I have a little judgment in me that's like, oh, that's super narcissistic or something to say that. I'll just be like, can we be free to be like kind of narcissistic and self-promoting? And it's like, yeah, all right, cool. And then just boom, like here's the next iteration of what's one to come through. And for me, I find that that's a really healthy way to bring any aspects of me that might get walled off based on the culture we live in, or my managing parts, the CEO in my head kind of thing, delegating different roles to different folks. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the magic of what's happening in life right now is we've all become aware that we live in these cultures together, and we can actually make those intentional. And so yeah, like bringing these kinds of questions into interpersonal dynamics, and for me, I mean, I also bring these kind of questions into workplaces and in any kind of collective really can open up room for quite a bit of magic. On the other hand, I do want to say one piece about responsibility, just because I find in these kinds of explorations, right, we're opening up to our more like tender parts of ourselves, like you mentioned, vulnerable parts of yourself, like the aspects of ourself that are where we can be a little bit more hesitant to kind of bring out into the fold. And so, what's been really evident in my life is the relationships where I have the most intimacy and connection. My best friends, my family members, my romantic partnerships, people who I'm business partners with, these kinds of things. Like they're really strong mirrors for me for unconscious aspects of myself that are playing out in my life experience, right? Um, and so for me, what's been important is like as I'm being with my insecurities and my fears that are coming up in different relationships or whatever it is, to be responsible for what I'm creating, right? Like I'm creating these insecurities, I'm creating these fears, and so I used to kind of share these, and I was kind of expecting somebody else to like solve this for me, right? Like, oh, I feel insecure when you're around other guys, and like you need to like do something about that. It's like, actually, the more mature route is like I'm going to be with my insecurity and get to the root of it and figure out what's going on, and ultimately liberate myself to be able to be fully with my experience without getting triggered. Because we manufacture our triggers, like triggers meaning like everything was great and all of a sudden something happens and I'm all like fight or flight or crashing, right? I'm not as well resourced as I can be. I don't have access to all the capacities I might normally have. So, but I'm manufacturing that. That's native and organic in me. Like somebody else doesn't trigger me. They're just mirroring something that I'm carrying around in me back to me. And so I'm manufacturing a trigger, and then that trigger is the signpost that can lead me to the root of where I'm not, where I'm manufacturing that trigger. And yeah, and this I could really get complex and nuanced with this because there's also like ultimately for me, what's important in a relationship is that I just want to be all of who I am and whoever I'm with to be all of who they are, and then if it works, it works. Right? It's like I used to sit in a lot of questions around like who do I need to be and how do I need to show up. You mentioned like playing it cool. Like I've got a well-built resume around playing it cool, being like a tough guy, having it all together. That was a big one for me. And it's like ultimately I just have discovered that that's not like luscious for me. That's not juicy for me. It doesn't give me. It's not life-giving. I just want to be all of who I am, and then everyone else be all of who they are, and then however things unfold is perfect. I'm not trying to perform and be a certain way, and then be with someone else who's acting a certain way. So we're trying to make things work. It's more just like let's just be all of who we are, and if it works, it works. And we can just enjoy ourselves, enjoy each other, enjoy the moment, and it's way less complicated. But that doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't have complexities in getting there because. We can really create a lot of crap. At least I can. I don't know if anybody else. Maybe I'm the only one. But so, I'm also in laughing. I feel like some lightheartedness and some playfulness in all this process is really nourishing and has been a critical component for me because it's not. It's I don't know. Getting too serious about it has not served me well. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm really touched by the question. I love what you're playing with, and I feel a deep sense of like felt. I feel the feeling of like possibility in my body. Like I get this bubbling up sensation of like oftentimes when more of us comes into the space and we can kind of there's like that out breath and the nervous systems can relax. It's like, oh, whew, I don't have to hold this back anymore, and maybe I never did have to hold this back anymore. We're just kind of like, okay, we can be in more coherence, we can be more attuned to each other and notice more subtle and refined and nuanced things. And for me, that's like that's the zest, like that's the juice. And yeah, like being able to um, uh, bring fears and insecurities in has been really liberating for me in that exploration, in that process. So thank you for your question. I've enjoyed what it's inviting to come through me and be shared. Um, and yeah, super curious how it goes and whether or not this resonates with anyone else. I'm going to share it on a couple of platforms and just see if it's useful for anyone. And feel free to challenge me on things because, like I said, I'm just playing life and wondering what's helpful. So, lots of love to you all, and enjoy the moment.